Is it no longer Netanyahu but Trump himself who is derailing the Swiss peace talks, as his latest threats crash into the quiet choreography of diplomats in the Alps? Has Trump's warning that he could take over the rest of the country now sparked fresh fury inside Tehran, turning a fragile negotiating table into a stage for open rage and defiance? As the talks hang by a thread, is Mujtaba's top negotiator now warning the US to watch out, signaling that Iran's patience with Trump's language is wearing dangerously thin? When Ghalibaf says the more they talk, the more we act, is he delivering a chilling warning to Washington that every new threat from Trump could trigger a fresh move on Iran's side? As Trump's threats echoed through the Swiss talks, Tehran is reportedly weighing its next move, balancing diplomatic pressure with the option of a harder response. On June 21st, Iranian negotiators formally protested Trump's latest threats during the talks in Switzerland, making clear they see his comments as a direct challenge to the process. A source told Press TV that Tehran directly raised its objections with US officials in the room, forcing American envoys to answer for the president's language in real time. Iran's delegation is now said to be assessing the conditions for what it calls a proper response to Trump, hinting that both diplomatic and non-diplomatic options are on the table. Iran's Parliament Speaker Bagher Ghalibaf has warned that Washington must be careful with its words, framing Trump's rhetoric as a potential trigger for escalation. Iran's top negotiator has stressed that Tehran's armed forces remain ready to respond if needed, linking the military posture directly to the tone of US statements. Ghalibaf said, and I quote, "If their threats had worked, they would not have reached today's impasse. The more they talk, the more we act." Unquote. Subsequently, Iran's delegation reportedly walked out of the talks venue to mark its protest, using their physical exit as a visible rebuke to Trump's remarks. The protest unfolded even as Washington and Tehran were holding a new round of negotiations, underscoring how fragile the atmosphere in the room had become. An Iranian source told Fast News that Trump's comments directly disrupted the Swiss negotiations, throwing carefully prepared schedules and agendas into doubt. The same source added that Trump's remarks created real uncertainty over whether the talks would even continue, raising the specter of a collapse just as momentum was building. Earlier on June 21st, Trump had already warned Iran to curb Hezbollah or face new strikes, setting the stage for the backlash that later spilled into the Swiss negotiating rooms. His message appeared on Truth Social just after the new round of talks began, undercutting the calm diplomatic optics with an unmistakably hard-edged threat. Trump said, and I quote, "Iran must immediately stop their highly paid proxies in Lebanon from causing trouble. If they don't, we'll hit Iran very hard again, just like we did last week, only harder." Unquote. The warning landed just as US and Iranian teams were meeting under a recent memorandum of understanding, highlighting the gap between public threats and closed-door diplomacy. Vice President J.D. Vance has said Trump remains committed to a broader regional truce, framing the threats as pressure meant to enforce calm rather than derail the process. Vance has described the Lebanon ceasefire as critical to any long-term Middle East settlement, stressing that without quiet on that front, no wider agreement can truly hold.
Well, I'll say just a few words here. And first of all, I have some notes of appreciation. First of all, I want to thank the President of the United States, who sends his best to all the great leaders assembled here, because he's empowered us to find a diplomatic resolution to a host of issues that matter to the American people, but I think the world. The opening of the Strait of Hormuz, the ending of the Iranian nuclear program, all of these things have already been accomplished. The question before us now is how much more can we accomplish together? Can we turn over a new leaf? Can we change relations in the Middle East permanently? Or do we go back to doing things the old way, which is not our preference, but is certainly very much something that can happen. I have a few other notes of appreciation. First of all, to the Prime Minister of Pakistan. A dear friend of the President's, a dear friend of mine, a guy who has been, with his leadership and his very careful and skilled negotiation, has got us to this point. To his Field Marshal in Pakistan, Asim Munir. I will say that since Field Marshal Munir welcomed us with the Prime Minister in Islamabad, I have joked that I have two very, very important people in my life, an Indian and a Pakistani. The Indian is my wife, and the Pakistani is Field Marshal Munir. And I've probably talked to Field Marshal Munir more than I've talked to anybody else over the last 3 months. Would not be here without his statesmanship. He is, of course, a great military leader, but I think he's shown himself to be a great diplomat. And, of course, who's an amazing friend of the United States of America, but has been also an important part of getting us to this point. I think it's important for the American people, but people all over the world to appreciate that what's brought us to this moment is the president's leadership and the president's willingness to see a Middle East that is much different 10 years from now than it was 10 years ago. And what we're trying to accomplish here is very simple. Through diplomacy, through working together to transform the Middle East, where Iran and the Gulf have been at war with each other, or at least have had very unfriendly relations. Iran has been a driver of regional instability. Now we see a future where everybody can work together to promote peace and prosperity for everyone. What we have already seen back home in the United States is lower gas prices. We've seen the free flow of oil and gas. We've seen peace. And now we're trying to build on that to see if we can build something even better and more sustainable for the future. This is a historic meeting. Never before, outside of Islamabad and here, so outside the last few months, never before has the Iranian and American leadership met at such a high level. What the president has asked us to do is turn over a new leaf, to transform our relationship with the people of Iran and to extend an outstretched hand that says to the people of Iran that if your leadership is willing to give up being a driver of regional instability, if they are willing to give up nuclear weapons ambitions for the long term, then the United States is willing to fundamentally transform our relationship with that country. That is certainly our goal. We've already made great progress over just the last few hours, and I expect that we'll make additional progress in the hours to come. Thank you all.
Is Trump now launching a frantic bid to save face after President Pezeshkian appeared to insult him on television, turning a fragile peace process into a personal showdown played out on global screens? Is Trump really talking about taking over Iran even as he sells a peace deal to the world, blurring the line between diplomacy and invasion threats in the middle of delicate negotiations? Under mounting pressure from the talks in Switzerland, is Trump trying to regain control by warning Pezeshkian to watch his mouth, escalating his language just as the deal hangs in the balance? Could the U.S. end up sabotaging its own negotiations and sliding toward the threat of invasion, if Trump keeps pairing bold peace claims with ever-sharper warnings of military action? Does Araghchi's defiant, "we're waiting for them," now loom over Trump's invasion talk, hinting that Tehran is preparing politically and militarily for exactly the escalation Washington is hinting at? Trump said, and I quote, "He better watch his mouth. He better shape up, or we will take over the rest of the country." Unquote. As Washington scrambles to calm Mojtaba Khamenei's camp over the escalating Lebanon crisis, Tehran has thrown in a new shock. Even as negotiators sit down by Lake Lucerne, Iran's president has chosen to make a fresh declaration in Tehran. Masoud Pezeshkian has bluntly stated that Iran will not give up its uranium enrichment program. At the same time, the president says Iran is ready to put in writing that it has no intention of building a nuclear bomb. This stance is a fresh curveball for U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who is already firefighting the political damage from Benjamin Netanyahu's strikes in Lebanon. Vance has so far kept a low profile and avoided extended press engagement, allowing Iran's leaders and media to dominate the narrative.
Are you about the Pakistani role, especially?
Very good. We love Pakistan. Thank you. Excuse me.
According to the memorandum, Iran has already pledged that it will not build nuclear weapons, anchoring the deal on a clear no-nukes commitment even as enrichment continues. However, the final technical nuclear negotiations are scheduled to be held over a 60-day window from the signing of the MOU, meaning the most delicate details are still to be hammered out. The first round of direct talks between Iranian and U.S. delegations formally began on June 21 in Switzerland, marking the start of an intensive new phase in this fraught diplomatic process. On the table in Switzerland are the Lebanon war, security and access around the Strait of Hormuz, and the fate of Iran's frozen assets, making this round of talks as much about regional fires as about the nuclear file itself.
We will not give up our right to enrichment, and they, too, will be forced to accept it. You all know what the so-called President of the United States was saying. He had made a complete 180-degree turn. He was saying that Iran must surrender unconditionally. Iran has no right to do this. It has no right to do that. Then he gave a speech and said that Iran has a right to do this. It has the right to possess this. In other words, he has reversed himself by 180 degrees compared to his previous positions, and has accepted that they cannot ignore our rights.
Pezeshkian referred to Donald Trump's recent remarks backing Iran's right to maintain a ballistic missile stockpile.